Hello everybody, welcome to another video upload here on my channel, Four Corners of the Earth. And I'm doing another read of the Bible. We're going to continue where I left off. We're going to start at Leviticus chapter 12. It's still going through the rules that the Israelites had to take in different measures. We're going to be talking about like the purification after childbirth, the regulations about leprosy on the clothing, cleansing from leprosy. So it's like this was like a way of like keeping it it was like the sanitation of that time, and it's very interesting to see how they did it. But we're gonna start off here. Please follow along with your Bibles. I hope you all doing good. Leviticus chapter 12. Jehovah went on to say to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, if a woman becomes pregnant and gives birth to a male, she will be unclean for 7 days, just as she is in the days of the impurity when she is menstruating. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin will be circumcised. She will continue cleansing herself from the blood for the next 33 days. She should not touch any holy thing, and she should not come into the holy place until she fulfills the days of her purification. If she should give birth to a female, she will then be unclean for 14 days, just as she would be during her menstruation. She will continue cleansing herself from the blood for the next 66 days. When that day of her purification for a son or a daughter are completed, she will bring a young ram in its first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to the priest. He will present it before Jehovah and make atonement for her, and she will be clean for her flow of blood. This is the law about the woman who gives birth to either a male or a female. But if she cannot afford a sheep, she must then take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and for a burnt offering and 1 for a sin offering, and the priest will make atonement for her, and she will be clean." Chapter 13. Jehovah continued to speak to Moses and Aaron, saying, "If a man develops on his skin a swelling, a scab, or a blotch, and it could become the disease of leprosy on his skin, he must then be brought to Aaron and the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests. The priest will examine the infection on his skin. When the hair in the infection has turned white and the appearance of the infection is deeper than the skin, it is the disease of leprosy. The priest will examine it and declare him unclean. But if the blotch on his skin is white, and its appearance is not deeper than the skin, and the hair has not turned white, the priest will then quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will then examine him on the 7th day, and if it appears that the infection has stopped and has not spread on the skin, the priest will quarantine him for another 7 days. The priest should examine him again on the 7th day, and if the infection has faded and has not spread in the skin, the priest will declare him clean. It was only a scab. The man will then wash his garments and be clean. But if the scab has definitely spread on the skin after he appears before the priest to establish his purification, he will then appear again before the priest. The priest will examine it, and if the scab has spread in the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is leprosy. If the disease of a leprosy develops in a man, he must then be brought to the priest, and the priest will examine him. If there is a white swelling on the skin, and it has turned the hair white, and there is an open sore in the swelling, it is chronic leprosy on his skin, and the priest will declare him unclean. He should not quarantine him, for he is unclean. Now, if the leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers the person with the disease from head to foot, as far as the priest can see, and the priest has examined him and sees that the leprosy has covered all his skin, he will then declare the infected person clean. All of it has turned white, and he is clean. But whenever an open sore appears in it, he will be unclean. When the priest sees the open sore, he will declare him unclean. The open sore is unclean. It is leprosy. But if the open sore again turns white, he will then come to the priest. The priest will examine him, and if the infection has turned white, the priest will then declare the infected person clean. He is clean. If a person develops a boil on his skin and it heals, but in the place of the boil a white swelling or a reddish white blotch has developed, he must then show himself to the priest. The priest will examine it, and if it appears to be deeper than the skin and its hair has turned white, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy that has broke out in the boil. But if the priest examines it and sees that there is no white hair, and it is not deeper than the skin and appears faded, the priest will then quarantine him for 7 days. And if it has clearly spread on the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is a disease. But if the blotch stays in one place and has not spread, it is only the inflammation from the boil, and the priest will declare him clean. Or if someone has a scar from the fire and the raw flesh of the scar becomes a reddish white blotch or a white one, the priest will then examine it. If the hair in the blotch has turned white and it appears to be deeper than the skin, it is leprosy that has broken out in the scar, and the priest will declare him unclean. It is disease of leprosy. But if the priest examines it and sees that there is no white hair in the blotch, and it's not deeper than the skin and it is faded, the priest will then quarantine him for 7 days. The priest will examine him on the 7th day, and if it has clearly spread on the skin, the priest will then declare him unclean. It is the disease of leprosy. But if the blotch stays in one place and has not spread over the skin and it is faded, it is only a swelling of the scar, and the priest will declare him clean because it is an inflammation of the scar. When a man or a woman develops an infection on the head or on the chin, the priest will then examine the infection. If it appears to be deeper than the skin and the hair is yellow and thin, the priest will then declare such one unclean. It is an infection of the scalp or the beard. It is leprosy of the head or of the chin. But if the priest sees that the infection does not appear to be deeper than the skin and there is black hair in it, the priest should quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will examine the infection on the 7th day, and if the infected area has not spread and no yellow hair has developed in it, and the appearance of an infected area is not deeper than the skin, the person should have himself shaved, but he will not have the infected area shaved. Then the priest will quarantine the infected person for 7 days. The priest will again examine the infected area on the 7th day, and if the infection of the scalp and beard has not spread on the skin and it does not appear deeper than the skin, the priest must then declare him clean, and he should wash his garments and be clean. But if the infection clearly spreads on the skin after his purification, the priest will examine him, and if the infection has spread on the skin, the priest does not need to look for yellow hair. That person is unclean. But if the examination shows that the infection has not spread and black hair has grown on it, the infection has been healed. He is clean, and the priest will declare him clean. If a man or a woman develops blotches on their skin, and the blotches are white, the priest will examine them. If the skin blotches are faded white, it is a harmless rash that has broken out on the skin. That person is clean. If a man loses the hair of his head and becomes bald, he is clean. If he loses the hair on the front of his head and becomes bald there, he is clean. But if a reddish white sore develops on the bald part of his scalp or on his forehead, it is leprosy breaking out on the scalp or on his forehead. The priest will examine him, and if the swelling from the infection is reddish white on the bald spot on top of his head or on his forehead, and it looks like leprosy on his skin, he is a leper. He is unclean, and the priest should declare him unclean because of the disease on his head. As for the leper who has the disease, his garments should be torn and his head should be left ungroomed, and he should cover over his mustache and call out, unclean, unclean. He will be unclean the whole time that he has the disease. Since he is unclean, he should live in isolation. His dwelling place will be outside the camp. If the disease of a leprosy contaminates a garment, whether a woolen or a linen garment, either in the warp or in the woof of the linen or of the wool or in the skin or in anything made of skin, and the yellowish, green, or reddish stain from the disease contaminates the garment, a skin, the warp, the woof, or any article of skin, it is a contamination from leprosy, and it should be shown to the priest. The priest will examine the disease, and he must quarantine the disease for 7 days. When he examines the disease on the 7th day, and sees that it has spread in the garment, in the warp, in the woof, or in the skin, regardless of what the skin is used for, the disease is malignant leprosy, and it is unclean. He should burn the garment, or the warp, or the woof, in the wool, or in the linen, or an article of skin in which the disease has developed, for it is malignant leprosy. It should be burned in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and the disease has not spread in the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any article of skin, the priest will then command that they should wash the contaminated item, and he will quarantine it for another 7 days. The priest will then examine the contaminated item after it has been thoroughly washed. If the appearance of the contamination has not changed, even if the disease has not spread, it is unclean. You should burn it in the fire because it has been eaten away, either from its underside or from its outside. But if the priest has examined it, and the contaminated part is faded after it has been thoroughly washed, he will then tear it out of the garment, or the skin, or the warp, or the woof. However, if it still appears in another part of the garment, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any article of skin, it is spreading, and you should burn any contaminated item in the fire. But when the contamination disappears from the garment, or the warp, or the woof, or any article of skin that you wash, it should then be washed a second time, and it will be clean. That is the law of the disease of leprosy in a garment of wool, or of linen, or in the warp, or in the woof, or in any article of skin, for declaring it clean, for unclean. Chapter 14. Jehovah continued to speak to Moses, saying, This is to be the law of the leper on this day his purification is established. When he is to be brought to the priest will go outside the camp and examine him. If the leper has been cured of the leprosy, the priest will command him to bring 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet material, and hyssop for his cleansing. The priest will command that the one bird be killed in the earthenware vessel over running water. But he should take the living bird along with the cedar wood, the scarlet material, and the hyssop, and dip them together in blood of that bird that was killed over the running water. Then he will spatter it 7 times on one, cleansing himself from the leprosy, and declare him clean, and he will set the living bird free in the open field. The one cleansing himself must wash his garments and shave off all his hair and bathe in the water, and he will be clean. Afterward, he may come into the camp, but he will dwell outside his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day, he should shave off all the hair on his head and his chin and his eyebrows. After he shaves off all his hair, he will wash his garments and bathe himself in water, and he will be clean. On the 8th day, he will take 2 sound young rams, 1 sound female lamb in its first year, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, and 1 log measure of oil. And the priest who declares him clean will present the man who is cleansing himself along with the offerings before Jehovah at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest will take the 1 young ram and offer it as a guilt offering, together with the log measuring of oil, and he will wave them back and forth as a wave offering before Jehovah. Then he will slaughter the young ram in the place where the sin offering and the burnt offering are usually slaughtered, in a holy place, because, like the sin offering, the guilt offering belongs to the priest. It is something most holy. Then the priest will take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest will put it on the right earlobe, on the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest will take some of the log measure of oil and pour it into his own left palm. The priest will then dip his right finger into the oil that is in his left palm and spatter some of the oil with his finger 7 times before Jehovah. Then the priest will put some of the remaining oil in his palm on the right earlobe of one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the blood of the guilt offering. The priest will put what is left over of the oil in his palm on the head of one of cleansing himself, and the priest will make atonement for him before Jehovah. The priest will sacrifice the sin offering and make atonement for the one cleansing himself from his impurity, and afterward he will slaughter the burnt offering. And the priest will offer up the burnt offering and the grain offering on the altar, and the priest will make atonement for him, and he will be clean. However, if he is poor and does not have enough means, he will then take 1 young ram as a guilt offering for a wave offering in order to make atonement for himself, along with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log measure of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons according to his means. The one will serve as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. On the 8th day, he will bring them for establishing his purification to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting before Jehovah. The priest will take the young ram of the guilt offering and the log measure of oil, and the priest will wave them back and forth as a wave offering before Jehovah. He will then slaughter the young ram of the guilt offering, and the priest will take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the right earlobe of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. The priest will pour some of the oil into his own left palm, and he will then spatter with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left palm 7 times before Jehovah. And the priest will put some of the oil that is in his palm on the right earlobe or of the one cleansing himself, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the same places that he put the blood of the guilt offering. The priest will then put what is left over the oil in his palm on his head of the one cleansing himself, in order to make atonement for him before Jehovah. He will offer up one of the turtle doves or one of the young pigeons according to his means, the one he can afford, as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering along with the grain offering, and the priest will make atonement for the one cleansing himself before Jehovah. This is the law for the one in whom the disease of leprosy was, but who does not have the means when establishing his purification. Then Jehovah said to Moses and Aaron, "When you come into the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, and I contaminate a house in your land with the disease of leprosy, the one to whom the house belongs should then come and tell the priest, some kind of contamination has spread in my house. The priest will give orders, to clear out the house before he comes to examine the contamination, in order that he may not declare everything that is in the house unclean. And after the priest will come into it and inspect the house. He will examine the affected area, and if the walls of the house are contaminated with yellowish, green, or reddish depressions, and they appear to be deeper than the wall surface, the priest will then go out of the house to the entryway of the house and quarantine the house for 7 days. Then the priest will return on the 7th day and make an inspection. If the contamination has spread in the walls of the house, the priest will then give orders, and the contaminated stones must be torn out and thrown outside the city into an unclean space. Then he is to have the inside of the house thoroughly scraped, and the plaster and mortar that is removed should be discarded outside the city in an unclean place. They will then insert other stones in the place of the stones they removed, and he should use different mortar and have the house plastered. If, though, the contamination returns and breaks out in the house after the stones were torn out and the house was scraped and replastered, the priest will then go in and inspect it. If the contamination has spread in the house, it is malignant leprosy in the house is unclean. He will then have the house pulled down, its stones, its timbers, and all the plaster and mortar of the house, and carried outside the city to an unclean place. But whoever enters the house of any of the days it's quarantined will be unclean until the evening. And whoever lies down in the house should wash his garments, and whoever eats in the house should wash his garments. However, if the priest comes and sees that the contamination has not spread in the house after the house was replastered, the priest will then declare the house clean, because the contamination has been healed. In order to purify the house from uncleanness, he will take 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet material, and hyssop. He is to kill the one bird in the earthenware vessel over the running water. Then he will take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet material, and the live bird, and dip them in the blood of the bird that was killed and in the running water. And he must spatter it toward the house 7 times. And he will purify the house with uncleanness with the blood of the bird, the running water, the live bird, the cedar wood, the hyssop, and the scarlet material. He will then set the live bird free outside the city in the open field and make atonement for the house, and it will be clean. This is the law respecting any case of leprosy, infection of the scalp or in the beard, leprosy of the garment or the house, and respecting swellings, scabs, and blotches, in order to determine whether something is unclean and when something is clean. This is the law about leprosy. I'm going to end it there, guys. And gals. Interesting read, but like I said, it's all like, they didn't have machines back then. You know what I mean? Like they obviously like had a way of, doing things like, primitive. Like that's how you found out that someone was clean, and the measures you would take, that the priest would have to take in order to like it not spread, and see what was unclean and clean. And then it's very interesting to see how that was the way it was done. Nowadays you just go to the hospital and they have machines and read you like a book, but this is how it was back then. You inspect the person for 7 days, and then that's how you'd find out what was going on. So super interesting. I love it. That's actually very fascinating to me. Some people don't like reading that part of the Bible, but I find it fascinating, and how smart like they would do stuff like that back in the day. But anyways, I hope you're all doing good. I didn't do a video for a couple of days. One, I got a new job, so I'm happy for that. And then just other things in my life that I was busy with. But now I'm going to try to do it every day, no matter what excuse I try to do. Excuse me, I'm a little tired, and I've been... I'm not going to put an excuse on. There's no excuse on not reading the Bible. I have time for other things throughout the day, and like the Bible says, there's time for everything. So I'm going to make time every day, at least 30 minutes, because that's all it really is, to read the Bible. And I always feel good about it, and I feel horrible when I go to sleep and I didn't read the Bible. It's always in the back of my head. Anyways, I hope you're all doing good and staying safe, and God bless you guys and your families. Thank you.